A pair of documentaries about some famous men and some dramatic turns from people like Mark Wahlberg and Matt Damon lead the charge for the July 2021 movie wrap-up. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It, and welcome to my movie reviews for July of 2021. We're sort of coming back to all of the movies that I missed throughout the year before we get to my year-end wrap-up, best and worst. We'll do that in a couple of weeks' time, but for now, we're going sort of month by month, reviewing all the movies that I missed that were, pretty big, and maybe some not so big that I sought out, sounded interesting. Maybe they have a high Rotten score, whatever. But this month, we are looking at two documentaries: Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain; Joe Bell, starring Mark Wahlberg; Val, which is a Val Kilmer documentary; Stillwater, starring Matt Damon; The Green Knight, starring Dev Patel; and a supernatural drama film, kind of a thriller a little bit, but I guess it's not really a thriller. Mostly a drama, I would say. 9 Days is the name of that one. A bit of an under-the-radar movie, but I'm attempting to get to 200 for my 2021 year-end list, so I picked a few more obscure ones that I thought sounded interesting, and we'll see. Some of them have panned out, others perhaps not so much, but we're going to go in order of release. So that starts us off with Roadrunner, a film about Anthony Bourdain. And this is from director Morgan Neville, who is an Oscar winner for his documentary 20 Feet from Stardom, which I absolutely loved. So I was excited to hear about this. I do not really know much about Anthony Bourdain's life, to be honest. I knew that he committed suicide. I knew that he was a food critic. But I don't watch like a lot of the food shows, and I don't watch really travel shows either. And that's sort of the two worlds that he joined together for his show. So I think it was called Parts Unknown, right? So this documentary interviews some of his friends and family that he left behind when he took his own life. And a lot of it is narrated by him, I guess maybe from an audiobook or something. But there was some controversy with the manipulation of some of his voice work, because he's literally talking about, things in the past, because he is no longer with us. And so some of the stuff about his own suicide and stuff was manipulated in the studio, and there was a little bit of controversy about that. I have to admit, it was definitely a little bit jarring. And we have on the flip side of that, the documentary Val, about Val Kilmer, which we'll talk about momentarily. And in that one, Val can't really speak anymore either because of his throat cancer. So he talks with like one of those voice box things. So it's all his words, but his son is actually doing the narration in Val's words. So a couple of different ways to do that. But yeah, manipulating somebody to make them talk about their own suicide, I don't know. It's a little bit odd. But you know what? They did something similar with the Roger Ebert documentary. And I'll be honest, I can't remember if he was dead or alive when they made the documentary, but I know because of the thousands and thousands of hours they had of his audio, they were able to recreate his voice in that way, for him to do movie reviews still, and for him to just kind of talk in general with his computer. And so I'm imagining they employed a similar technique here. There's obviously tons of footage over the years of Anthony Bourdain. So, but let's, aside from that, let's get to the meat and potatoes of the actual movie, because this really is a nice look into Tony's life, how he affected people, his upbringing, all the things that you expect, I think, in this kind of documentary. It's just looking at who he was as a person, and why he got famous, and why people were drawn to him, and this and that. But the last 15 or 20 minutes or so focuses on his suicide, things leading up to that, maybe signs that people didn't quite see, his mental health issues. I do think there was maybe a missed opportunity for director Neville to sort of make this more of a call to action about people with mental health, and make it more of that. But I don't think that's the story he wanted to tell. I think he wanted to more celebrate the life of Anthony Bourdain. And somebody could certainly come along and do a documentary about, here's, a bunch of celebrities that have committed suicide in the last 10 years, Chris Cornell, Robin Williams, Chester Bennington from Lincoln Park, Anthony Bourdain, and figure out, I think maybe Kate Spade committed suicide too. I can't remember, but anyway, there could be a documentary in that by itself, but I don't think that's quite the story that Neville wanted to tell. I think he wanted it to be mostly a celebration of life, and a biography just straight ahead about Tony Bourdain. But then, at the end, you do sort of have to talk about that, because it was obviously a big part of his story, unfortunately. So overall, though, I think this is a pretty solid movie. I didn't know much about the man. Like I said, I learned a lot. I get why people were drawn to him. I get why people liked him when he was doing his shows. I give Roadrunner a B+. Next is Joe Bell. This is with Mark Wahlberg. I really didn't know much about this film going into it. This is a true story, and Mark Wahlberg plays the title character here. He sets out walking across America to speak out against bullying, because his teenage son, Jaden, who was, very kind of flamboyantly gay, was bullied mercilessly at his school. So, he's sort of going on this walkabout, and we see a lot of stuff with that. We see some stuff with Jaden from back when he was in school getting bullied, and we also see some things in the present day during the walkabout with Joe's wife, because she obviously is, not with him on this journey. She's home. She's played by the wonderful Connie Britton. I always talk about her from Friday Night Lights, but everything really, Nashville and the first season of 911, and, known most for her TV work, but she's done some films as well. Her character, to be honest, is kind of ancillary to the story. Like, we get a few scenes with her, but it's mostly like, Joe, you need to come home, or, is this working out, and whatever. And even flashing back to when he first got the idea to do the walk, her sort of resistance to it. And at the same time, she is at home with their other child. So she is, doing that while he's on his walkabout. So, look, I think the intentions of this movie are clearly good. I don't want to say that their heart is in the wrong place here, but it doesn't come across good. It's really weird. Like, so I don't want to give spoilers, but I don't really know the story of this guy, and I don't know if they said anything in the trailers about this, but there's something that happens that we learn about a half hour, 40 minutes into the movie, and my job was sort of like dropped. I was like, okay, well, now let me go over the rest of this movie and see if I saw this coming or whatever. And it was fine. You can tell Mark Wahlberg's really trying his hand at something a little bit heavier than his normal action or comedy roles. He doesn't do a lot of hard-hitting drama. He's done a few. Lone Survivor, I feel like, is certainly up there, but even that, again, is a little action-oriented. But this movie just didn't connect for me. And you'd think maybe I would be more drawn to it as somebody, in the gay community, but it came off as authentic. Like, I didn't think it was insulting at all. I really just think none of the pieces of this movie really came together. And the end of the movie, again, no spoilers, I think is really going to divide people. I did not really care for it. It made a lot of things seem basically pointless in the movie, and I don't think that was the intention of the writers and the directors to make you feel that way. And so for that, it just kind of missed its mark for me. I'm going to leave Joe Bell with a C. Val is up next. So again, I've mentioned this a couple of times now. This is about Val Kilmer, and yes, his son, Jack Kilmer, is doing all the narration, but it is Val's words. He is still alive and with us, and kind of well health-wise, but he is getting up there in age, and also the cancer has taken its toll, and he gets sick from time to time, and we see that actually in the movie at one of his autograph signing sessions. But he is one of these people, much like Soleil Moon Frye in last year's Kid 90. He had, thousands of tapes of all of these different moments and things in his life, coming up, and in, the height of his career in the 80s and 90s, and then, even through today. He's got tons of video chronicling, that's what I want to say, chronicling it all. And a lot of that footage is used here. A lot of things I certainly did not know about Val Kilmer, especially about his family life growing up and his brother dying very early on, when they were both just kids. So that really stuck with him, and we learn about that and how that affected his work and all of this. And we've also heard, how difficult he is as an actor, which could explain his lack of roles sort of after his peak. And I will admit, I've never been a huge Val Kilmer fan. He's okay. I didn't really like the movie Willow that much. I would have to watch it again. I saw it when I was like 9. I didn't think he was a particularly good Batman. He's done a few things that I liked over the years, but I think Top Gun is wildly overrated. And he's going to be in the new one, which I'm curious to see how that's going to work with his, voice box and everything. But Cruise insisted on it. Tom Cruise said, we're not doing this movie without the Iceman. So, okay, we'll see what happens. But he's in good spirits in this movie. And I think, sort of losing his lifeline to acting gave him some perspective, and he did talk about, some of the more difficult things that he did and the reason he sort of got that reputation. And I thought that was interesting. It's a nice reflective piece, but I will say that it's all very kind of sugar-coated and a lot like the Rita Moreno documentary I talked about last month. It's nice, and it's great to get an insight on this man while he's still with us, and to have him reflect sort of on some of the negative things that have been said about him, and maybe agreeing with some, maybe disagreeing with others. And it's, nice to see this kind of spirit from someone whose, career basically has been taken from him. So I do think it's probably a little bit better than the Rita Moreno one in that regard, but I think we could have gotten maybe a little bit more of, I don't know, not a hit piece necessarily, but a little more drama, a little more, less kind of fluff. But yeah, a lot of things I certainly didn't know. The thing about the younger brother when he was a kid, that definitely blew my mind. So I leave Val with an A-. I do think it's a pretty strong one for the celebrity docs that I've seen this year. All right, Stillwater is next. This is with Matt Damon as an oil rigger from Oklahoma who ends up moving to France because his daughter is locked up there. She's played by Abigail Breslin, all grown up. We've not seen her quite like this before. And he ends up taking in with a local woman there and staying with her and her kid to be closer to his daughter. That's played by Camille Cotton, who I was unfamiliar with. And this is, they don't want to say it, that it's based on, any kind of true story or anything. But if you know the name of Amanda Knox, this is basically, it's kind of reflecting her story. She spoke out about this when the movie came out, which I remember happening. And that's not what kept me away. It wasn't playing at my theater where I work, and it just sort of came and went. So I was like, well, I'll just wait for the 2021 wrap up to watch it. And so that's what I did. I'm a Matt Damon fan. And in fact, I just saw him in The Last Duel, which we'll get to in a couple videos from now, because I didn't see that when it was out either. But he's playing, I think, a little bit against type here. He's done dramas, certainly, but it's kind of rare in this day and age that sort of the, I don't know, quote unquote hero, I guess, of the story, or at least the main character that we are not supposed to hate, is, a regular blue collar American dude. You could say maybe he's a Trump supporter kind of thing. Like they actually get into that in the movie, and he's like, well, I didn't vote. So, I didn't vote for anybody. I don't vote. But by his lifestyle and his look and everything, you can kind of gather, okay, that's where they're going with this. And I think that's actually interesting. I don't get too political on the channel, but I think anybody that knows me knows, I'm not down with the Trump, but I think it's interesting that here is sort of the main character of this movie. We don't really see that a lot anymore, in this kind of day and age of, okay, well, we can't step on anybody's toes, so everybody has to be enlightened about everything. And this is just a regular working class Joe. And I actually appreciated that. Abigail Breslin is great here. I'm not sure if I've ever seen her do something with, this much kind of fire in her dramatic belly, at least as an adult. So I appreciated that. However, I do think that taking the fairly specific details of the Amanda Knox case and pretending that it has nothing to do with that is a bit icky. And I could see why she sort of rallied against that and said, like, okay, this is bringing back a whole bunch of things, especially the way that they end this movie, which, again, we don't do spoilers, so we're not going to go there. But it's an ending that I don't think serves some of the characters very well. Let's just put it like that. But overall, I enjoyed watching this movie. I do think it's maybe a stitch long. It's a bit over 2 hours. Don't think it needed to be that long. But I think there's a lot of really interesting character stuff going on here. And I liked Matt Damon's performance. And again, Breslin, cream of the crop performance for her as well. So overall, I thought this was an okay attempt at really trying to get those dramatic beats going. Not sure if it worked all the time, but I think it worked enough to warrant it a positive grade. So I'm going to leave Stillwater with a B-. All right, next is The Green Knight. Dev Patel, I'm telling you, this is one of my favorite actors that nobody really talks about. Everybody, I think, accepts that he's a pretty solid actor. He's been nominated before. I think for the movie Lion is what got him his nomination. But Slumdog is where, of course, we all, most of us met him for the first time. And he's done many, many things since then. Some of them a little lighter, like the Exotic Marigold movies, and some of them very heavy. And I think he always shows up. He always gives it his all. And I think he's doing that here as well. This is basically a King Arthur type story. He plays Gawain, who is a nephew of King Arthur, and he's setting out on a journey to face the Green Knight and test his courage, and meets obviously some peril along the way. Alicia Vikander, I guess is how you say that, and Joel Edgerton are a couple of his co-stars here. And this is another pretty long one. This is 2 hours and 10 minutes, and I do not think it needs to be that long. First of all, because it's only about 45 minutes in where I finally was like, oh, okay, something's happening in this movie. Like, there's some lush scenery. I gotta say that. The cinematography is good here. But in terms of, like, character development, storyline, not a lot happens until this really great scene in the forest. And again, no spoilers, so we won't talk about it specifically, but I clicked the pause button, and it was about 43 or something minutes in, and I was like, okay, something's finally happening, and we're almost an hour into this thing. So very slow start, and I'm not sure that it ever sort of kept that momentum either. I think you could have easily cut a good 20 to 25 minutes out of this movie and not missed anything, because I do think there's character development issues, but there are some good performances here from Patel and Alicia Vikander as well. She's usually pretty good. I don't remember seeing her in anything that recently either. I'm sure she pops up, but like the Tomb Raider movie was the last thing I really remember her, being kind of one of the stars of, but I'm sure I'm misremembering. But yeah, it was nice to see her again. And I'm not a huge fan of the whole Merlin lore. So I even asked my buddy Joe, who comes on this channel all the time, and his own channel here is Merlin the Mighty. Check it out. Plug for him. But I was like, okay, I'm not a huge fan of the Arthur mythos, so let me ask him what he thinks before I kind of finalize my grade. And he was literally in the same boat as me. So I was like, okay, well then I'm fine with my grade then. I accept it. This movie is disappointing. I have to say it. But I will say, visually, I think they did some interesting things, and Patel gives a great performance. I'm just not sure the script and, some other things in the film really put him up to enough of a task. So I leave The Green Knight with a C+. Way too long as well. All right, so finally we get to 9 Days. This is a supernatural drama starring Winston Duke, who has shown up in a few things lately, but Jordan Peele's Us is maybe, one of the most recent in this sort of vein, but he also was in Black Panther, bringing him into the MCU. And then Zazie Beetz is here as well from Deadpool 2, and Benedict Wong, another Marvel alum, Tony Hale, and Bill Skarsgård as well. So a lot of people that we know, and not many other people. Like, it's a pretty tightly knit movie, and here is basically the thing. It's a Spike Jonze produced movie too, which will explain some of this. But so Winston Duke is the lead here, and he plays this guy who has never been alive. His name is Will, and he interviews 5 unborn souls to determine which one can be given life on Earth. He can only pick one. It's a little bit like the Pixar movie Soul, actually, in its sort of overarching themes. They obviously take it in a different, less kid-friendly way, I guess. But so he has never been alive, but his buddy, his staff member, who's played by Benedict Wong, he was alive at one point. So he sort of remembers a lot of that and can tie it in with Will's decision making. This is a really interesting kind of a sci-fi supernatural-esque movie. I think it gives people a lot to think about. It certainly did with me, about sort of what makes up a good life, because some of these people that you think, oh, well, they're doing all the right things, he's definitely going to pick them, and they end up leaving halfway through, because it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe that's not what he's looking for. So I thought it was an interesting concept for sure. I don't know if I completely wrapped my head around it. It's not quite as palatable as Soul. I didn't really have a lot of questions about Soul. They explained away most of my questions about how it all worked, because they were explaining it to 22, the Tina Fey character, as they were explaining it to us, the audience. But Will doesn't really give us a ton of background on why this is, why he's the one who gets to decide, a lot of unanswered questions there. That may not affect people in the same way that it affected me. It sort of did make me think, all right, well, I wish there was a couple of more bits of information that we got, rather than just sort of accepting that this is the world. I didn't necessarily hate it, but I definitely thought, okay, just a couple more whispers of things might have been nice to kind of figure out how we got to this point. But it is certainly interesting, because these people, of course, have never lived, so all their feelings are new. And I'll be honest, I don't know when this was filmed, but of course these Pixar movies are in the works for years, so I'm sure it was filmed well after Soul was made. But I don't think it cribbed from Soul or anything. But I do think it's interesting that they came out within about 10 months of each other, less, I guess, about 8 months of each other, because they really do have pretty similar themes at their core. But I thought this was very, very interesting, well acted too by everybody. Tony Hale, for a while after Arrested Development, I could not see him as anything other than Buster Bluth, and then in Veep, I saw him as that bumbling idiot as well. But he's actually given us a couple of really nice dramatic turns lately, so I have to applaud him for that. But overall, I thought this was a pretty good movie for something I had never heard of. I leave 9 Days with a B+. All right, so that's going to do it. We will have another review video for the August movies, and then so on and so forth. And I'll be doing them hopefully every 2, 3, 4 days, so we can get to that best and worst of 2021 by, I'd love to do it by mid-April, But thank you for watching, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye.